My initials are SAW. I was doomed from the first day, okay? I've operated most kinds of saws that I'm aware of, with just very few exceptions. And of all those types of saws, one of the coolest, one of the most versatile with most applications is the Sawzall, okay? Now for thousands of years, when someone said saw, they meant a saw. Reciprocating action, powered entirely by the strength of an arm. A Sawzall is a reciprocating saw. Unlike a circular saw, which has a rim speed of around 10,000 feet per minute, now that's a lot, and so is subject to kickback and all sorts of uncontrollable nastiness and productivity. A Sawzall just goes forward and backward, fast enough, but typically the worst thing that can happen is it'll hang up and it'll shake you for a little bit till you get your finger off the trigger. It's not going to be throwing chunks. It's not going to crawl back up your leg. It's not going to break off a carbide tooth, which is going to come out of there like a BB. It's hard to get hurt by the Sawzall. Now you might get hurt by what drops free. For instance, you may not have thought about this, but a Sawzall is a pretty good tool for light-duty tree pruning. If you come up to a branch that's just a little too big for your lopper, you don't want to break the handles out of your lopper, break out your Sawzall, run out a cord or use your cordless Sawzall, get right up next to the heavier stem, it's going to come right through. So I've had this since I think 1993. I need a cord on it, but the cord can be quickly replaced. This has served me well. I stepped over onto this Porter Cable Tiger saw. To be honest, I have not gotten as attached to this saw as I was to this one. So there's a wide range of blades available for Sawzalls because there's a wide range of tasks you can do. For probably the last 5 years, the only blades that I've purchased have been these Milwaukee Axe or Torch. Now those come in wider or narrower curve. They come in longer or shorter lengths. So let me just show you how great these are. Gotta have a Sawzall to get it out of there. These are the best blades I've found. Now you can buy whatever Sawzall you want. You can buy whatever blades you want, but these are superior. These Milwaukee Torch, you see that little marketing name they've put on there? They say that because this is a metal cutting blade and it cuts like a cutting torch. You see this? The Axe, they call it that because it's going to cut through any kind of wood, including wood with nails embedded in it. So don't buy a Sawzall that does not have a variable speed trigger. The older triggers were full on or full off, and it was really hard to get into a nice, precise location with that blade going all over the place. Bring it right up against a piece and start the blade slowly. When you're cutting metal, high speed is not what you want. So I wouldn't take this up to full RPMs cutting through that metal. It makes too much heat, okay? And heat deteriorates a metal cutting implement. So just a good solid mid-speed. Now one thing to think about is this Sawzall reciprocates about 1.5 inches. So if I always do my cutting right up against the rest, the table, I'm going to wear out the first 1.5 inches of the blade, and I'm going to have 4 inches of blade that have never been used. So one thing to keep in mind, especially if you're just cutting mild steel, is once you're established in the cut, you can move the saw back to distribute the wear over the length of the blade, like this. Now you probably saw that as soon as I pulled away from that rest, the efficiency of the cutting dropped down because I was losing some stroke with vibration. But you know what? It's hard to do it wrong. One rule of thumb is anytime you're cutting metal with metal, if you see color, blue color, bronze color coming out of either your shavings or accumulating on your cutting implement, you're traveling too fast. You're applying too much power. You're horsing and generating friction that's going to soften your metal. So maybe you've got to cut through some drywall, but you don't want to just bury that blade in there and cut the wiring. If you change the orientation of the saw blade, put it against the drywall, can you see that that enables you to make a cut without dragging the handle, without rubbing your knuckles, without getting the blade too far into the wall cavity? Put it in there, bend the blade. You see that? The blade can be bent. So not only does a Sawzall obviate a handsaw, And many times it can put a cat's paw nail puller or even a Burke bar out of a job, if you can imagine that. So let's just say that I want to take this trimmer off. And so it's got nails holding it. Well, instead of pulling those nails out, maybe I cut those nails. But the blade won't go in. Here's what you do. You take your chisel or maybe a shim. So you drive that shim in to get a little bit of space. So your Sawzall blade will go right in. And once you're in, you can just come right on down the assembly, clipping out the nails you come to. So anybody that has ever operated as a Sawzall knows what happens as you're pulling the saw back while it's reciprocating, and that reciprocating tip comes into contact with a piece of wood, bam, bam, bam. You know, it jars you and maybe it bends the piece, it bends the blade. That's one of the advantages of this axe. It's so thick, it's so strong that you can almost use it as sort of a rough chisel. If you're in a rough situation where it just doesn't matter, where you can thrash and not offend anybody, and where time matters and quality or appearance doesn't, you can use this to bore right through a piece of plywood. You get my point. I mean, it's rough, it's fast, it's effective, it's going to get some work done. It sort of broadens the number of things you can do with the Sawzall when you absolutely have to. Cordless Sawzalls are terrific. You know, the 18-volt lithium-ion batteries at 20-volt puts a lot of horsepower in your hand. So consider a cordless Sawzall if you just have intermittent use or if you just don't want to be hung up with an extension cord. But in general, if you get a pro-quality Sawzall, if you're careful with it, if you use your head, if you try to think outside the box, it's gonna keep you out of trouble. It's gonna do things that you need to have done. You're always gonna be glad you owned it. Thanks for watching.